兄上はね、自分の母親を殺したんだ。
You might not know this, but it was the truth, because Arnold did kill his mother, but it was to free her from her suffering, not out of hatred. So they survived the burning ship, but the danger wasn't over. Arnold was seriously injured, and Rishi had been suppressing her panic while treating the rescued woman. She rushes back to the royal villa, took a bath quickly to avoid suspicion, and burst into Arnold's room. She found him sitting there on the bed, looking completely normal. He was even doing some paperwork. Rishi's eyes filled with tears, relieved that he was alive, and frustrated that he wasn't resting. She insisted he lie down. Utterly exhausted, she sat on the floor by his bed. He gently placed a hand on her cheek, soothing her. "There's no need to panic," he said. "I've already stopped the bleeding. It wasn't a very deep wound." Rishi shook her head and desperately pleaded to examine it herself. Arnold clearly didn't want it to show weakness, but seeing her on the verge of tears, he set his paperwork aside, crossed his arms, grabbed the hem of his shirt, and pulled it over his head, exposing his muscular frame. Rishi was usually embarrassed by his physique, but right now, all she felt was worry. Two severe wounds were visible, the old scars on his neck and the fresh one covered in white bandages. "Here," Arnold said, laying Rishi's hand atop his bandages. "Do as you wish." Rishi thanked him, and with his permission, she slowly unwrapped the bandages, and when they fell away, exposing his solid abdomen, Rishi's eyes were glued to the wound. She whimpered at the sight and disinfected her hands, asking him to close his eyes. Arnold obeyed in silence. She traced the line down his skin to check for feeling in the area, and noted that it wasn't discolored. She took his wrist to measure his pulse. It was a little fast, but still pretty relaxed for someone who'd just been stabbed. The wound had indeed stopped bleeding and was shallow. She was still examining it, wondering how the blood stopped so quickly when he said, "It's the goddess blood. It makes my wounds heal faster." He smiled, asking if she'd believe him. She considered it. Since he was a realist, he wouldn't joke about this. It would also explain the natural resilience she'd observed in Melia, Arnold's cousin, who shared the same divine blood as him. And it would even explain the scar on his neck. The gruesome neck wound was clearly the product of many repeated stabbings, and considering the location, his survival was a miracle. Arnold let out a breath, smiling softly. "I didn't think you'd take it so seriously," he said. "I can't think of any other reason for the bleeding to have stopped so quickly," she encountered. "So whatever the reason is, you're satisfied that the wound is shallow?" he asked. She knew that the wound was not deep, but she was still so scared. "I'm sorry, Prince Arnold," she whispered, leaning her cheek against his knee. "It's all because you protected me." Arnold sighed, bent over and picked her up. He put her on his lap and held her close. Rishi's eyes went wide, and she tried to protest, but he just held her tight. Seated on his lap, their faces were right next to each other. She tried to escape, worried about his wound, but he said, "If you're concerned for me, then stop struggling." She had no way to fight him now. Eventually, she relaxed, and Arnold began patting her back soothingly, just as she had once done for him. His life had just been in danger, and he was in pain, yet he was putting Rishi above all else. She understood that so well that she wanted to cry. "I never intended to frighten you," he said. She feared her reply would come out as a sob. "Will you scold me?" he asked her gently. She hesitantly shook her head, and he let out a puff of laughter that tickled her ear. Then he added, "You don't have to apologize for me protecting you." That only made Rishi want to cry even more. "You're forgetting something important. You were injured doing so," she managed to say, clinging to his back and pressing her forehead to his neck. She said that with him, she felt like she could do anything. But then she added, "I always believed that people could do more by joining hands with one another. But Sir Joel says you're stronger when you fight alone." She thought about Joel, the genius swordman who had died protecting her in her fifth life. If he had not done that, he may have survived long enough to ensure the royal family's safety, and maybe he might have gotten away too. She called his name but couldn't voice the question burning in her mind. What kind of life did Arnold had in the future after her death? Did the man who became the Emperor Arnold Hain, the one who wages war, achieve his goals? Or was his violence stopped? She only knew the next 5 years. She didn't even know if he lived or died after that. And to be fair, she had never thought about Arnold dying until now. She'd believed that he was the Almighty. But now, though, the thought of his death brought her endless terror. Your strength wanes with me at your side, Prince Arnold. She wrapped her arms around him and buried her face in his neck. He began to say something, but she continued. If you would tell me that it isn't true, then please. She begged, bringing her lips to the scar on his neck. Never get hurt again. Arnold gently stroked her hair. He held her close, burying his lips in her hair with a chuckle. He apologized for worrying her, but made no promises. She knew he wasn't the type to make promises he couldn't keep. What he wishes for lies somewhere far in the future. After his war, Rishi closed her eyes, holding back tears. She pressed her cheek to him, realizing that she was so far away from reaching it, even after 7 lives. However, she was absolutely certain of one thing, that she will use everything she'd learned for Prince Arnold's future. Arnold didn't know what Rishi was planning, but he simply let her cling to him and stroked her hair over and over. After assisting him with new bandages, she pressed her forehead into his neck once more and pleaded, May I stay with you for just a bit longer, Your Highness? She thought he probably didn't want anyone near him while he was injured, but he agreed, intertwining his fingers with hers. Relieved, she wanted to ask for more. Can I stay forever? She said. He replied, I don't mind. Then she noticed he felt warmer than usual. She thought he might have a fever, but before she could check, he fell back onto the bed, pulling her on top of him. She scrambled to get off, worried that his wound might open, but he kept her there, putting his hand on the back of her neck, forcing her to avert her eyes from the wound. She let him pull her to his chest, laying atop him as he stroked her hair. She could hear his heartbeat. She slowly lowered her eyelids and spoke her relief aloud. The blood you inherited protects you. At that, Arnold flinched, saying that he could never predict what she was thinking. He traced a finger over her ring, explaining that any effect the goddess's blood might produce are fact mixed with fiction at this point. He had read a lot of holy scriptures, but was never able to reach a concrete conclusion. Rishi sat up slightly and reached for Arnold's neck, touching the scar she'd secretly kissed. This wound, did your mother do this? The first time she had asked, he hadn't answered her, but now he did, with a simple yes in his soft voice, which brought fresh tears to her eyes. He was still so young. Oliver had told her that he'd first met Arnold as a 9-year-old boy, with bloody bandages wrapped around his neck, and his mother had stabbed him enough times to leave all these marks. But instead of asking more about his mother, the words that left her lips were, It must have hurt terribly. Arnold sighed and stroked Rishi's hair. I didn't really remember the pain. What stand out more in my mind is the memory of killing her afterward. Her breath caught in her throat. What was your mother like? She asked him. He replied, I have no way of knowing. The mother I knew was always like a soulless doll. He spoke emotionlessly, saying that he had never had a proper conversation with her until just before she died. I ran into her that day and triggered one of her fits. I was covered in blood, which is probably why she snapped. Blood? Why? Rishi asked. I was on my way back to the tower after killing my newborn sister. He replied and continued, I misjudged the situation. My mother smiled at me, cursed my birth, and drove a blade into me. He cupped her cheek, seeing her eyes glow misty. There's no need for you to look at me like that. I told you I don't remember the pain. Still, Rishi shook her head, voice barely a whisper. The last thing she pierced was her own throat. His eyes were calm like the sea. I think she cursed me once more as her blood coated me. She didn't die quickly. She suffered a lot. The wound she'd given herself was fatal. But if the goddess blood really helps a person heal, all it served to do for her was prolong her pain. Rishi immediately understood. You freed your mother from her suffering, she said. And that's why it was sad that he killed his mother. And that's why he thinks that marrying Rishi is such a terrible thing. Because he thinks he forced her into it. Rishi hung her head and wrapped her arms around him, pulling him to her. He returned her embrace. Please don't cry, he whispered. Those bloody days of your childhood, that's what marriage means to you, she said slowly. She understood why he saw marriage as a terrible act, a system of hostage and resentment from his childhood. Yet when she said that it was why he'd given her freedom, he disagreed. That's not true, he said. I just enjoy it. Arnold pulled her close. Your freedom, your strength, the way you pull anything and everything along with you as you fight for what will make everyone happiest. He affirmed the way she wanted to live. He had probably never been able to live as he wished, yet he permitted Rishi to choose what was most important to her. She thought about telling him she loved him, but shot down the thought. That wouldn't change his mind. Then she said, there's something I'd like to ask you, Your Highness. If, say, by the time I turn 20, I lose my life, he cuts her mid-sentence, saying flatly, I don't want to hear it. But Rishi continued, if I die, I want to be your bride in my next life too. Arnold's hands froze. Up until now, every time she died and returned to that day, her heart had danced at the new possibilities before her. Even if she lost things she'd built up to that point, the view before her had seemed full of opportunities. But now, in her 7th life, Rishi couldn't stop wishing for one thing and one thing only. In my 8th life, in my 9th life, and in my 10th, she could never choose anything else, and it didn't even feel like a restraint. I want to be by your side, Your Highness, she pleaded. She'd once said to him in a chapel that she was resolved to be his wife. He had kissed her then and told her that she didn't need to be. If it's not a resolution but a wish, would you allow that? She asked, wishing that he would just nod and say fine in that gentle voice of his. That's not what he did, however. He simply closed his eyes and placed a soft kiss on the ring she was wearing, a gesture that signified his proposal. So it wasn't a verbal promise, but it wasn't a rejection either. He called her name, and it seemed to be the wish of his own. But Arnold would never vocalize that wish, so all she could hear was his heartbeat. He pulled her to his chest. He was accepting her, even though he saw his own kindness and their marriage as a sin. Rishi couldn't hold back anymore. Arnold's pure kindness devastated her. I don't want Prince Arnold to feel any more pain. She didn't want him getting hurt for her sake. Arnold stared down at her, tracing her wet lashes with his thumb. When he gently called her name, she shook her head, and for a time after that, Rishi fell to pieces in front of him, just as she had once before. No matter how many times he stroked her hair or murmured her name, her tears never seemed to end. She burdened the kind Arnold for some time after that. After Rishi calmed down, she buried her face in her pillow. She'd put away the first aid kit and changed into a nightgown that didn't expose much of her skin. Then she updated Arnold on the woman they had rescued, who confirmed the attacker was the same man who lured them onto the ship, known by the fake name Thaddeus. He was identified by his voice and build, having been seen previously with blonde hairs and deep blue eyes. The guards were focusing their search on men with injuries matching his, a stab to the stomach and a broken arm, though both Arnold and Rishi agreed that he would likely escape, giving his knight-like strength and hunter mobility. Rishi linked that hooded guy to Arnold's mother by repeating the man's final words to Arnold. Is it true that you resemble your mother, Your Highness? Their pillows were right next to each other and their fingers were still intertwined. Arnold confirmed that he did resemble her. Rishi deducted that the attacker must have known his mother as a royal priestess before she came to Galkine, because it would have been impossible after she had married Arnold's father. So potentially the hooded guy Thaddeus had some ties to high-ranking individuals in the church. Rishi gulped, someone with high ties to the church, with a ship that can take him across the sea, one who does business with nobility as a merchant. She had a strange sense of deja vu. If you factor in his knight-like combat abilities and his hunter moves, Rishi frowned, puzzled. He's like me, she thought, and gripped Arnold's hand tighter. What's wrong? Arnold asked. It's nothing. She was worried those blue eyes would see right through her, so she changed the subject. It's clear that this man who calls himself Thaddeus is no mere slave trader. She pretended that was her true concern. They also think that the international human trafficking incident is likely another complicated trap designed to harm Galkine. Now let's take a moment to discuss Thaddeus. The author's clear hint that Thaddeus is like Rishi suggests that he might also be a time looper, though that could be a red herring meant to mislead us. But I still believe it strongly. Also, it seems very likely that Thaddeus' real fight isn't with Arnold, but with the current emperor. There could be possibility that Thaddeus might have loved Arnold's mother before the emperor took her as a hostage bride, and now he wants revenge, and he's using the slave trade and other means to attack the emperor or start a war. I honestly kind of wish that he would be the one to kill the emperor and not Arnold, because I really don't want Arnold to have more baggage or emotional trauma. And it's hard to accept that Arnold, who had shown such kindness, would start a war and kill innocent people without being cornered or forced, much like he was with his mother. And I think Thaddeus will be the one who will set up events to force Arnold into a corner. Plus, I used to think that Arnold lived in loops as well, but after reading about Thaddeus, I'm not so sure. Though it's a strong possibility that he knows something about the future, and he also has goddess's blood in him, which could provide the power of dream sight as well. Just like Melia having dreams about a different loop, he might just have similar visions. And maybe he has seen Rishi in his dreams as well, and had been searching for her since. That would explain why he didn't question her vast knowledge like everyone else, and has treated her with such familiarity. Anyways, tell me your thoughts. For now, let's go back to the story. Arnold shifts the focus, prioritizing Rishi's primary goal. He taps his forehead against hers and says, "Granting your wish come first," agreeing to concentrate efforts on rescuing the trafficking victims. Then he traced the edge of her nails with his thumb. The touch felt ticklish and the gesture was almost playful. She never imagined Arnold might touch someone like this in any of her past lives. She pouted and he let go of her hand, instead reaching out to touch her cheek. Rishi hunched her shoulders as his finger brushed near her ear. Arnold had surely noticed that she didn't resist though. Hardly able to bear the embarrassment she felt, Rishi timidly said, "You're a bit needy today, aren't you?" At that, Arnold merely blinked at her. "Is it uncomfortable being in that position? If it hurts to lie on your back and on your side, it would be best to lessen the burden on your wounds as much as possible," she was saying, and then an idea hits her. So she snuggled close to him. He called her name as a question. She explains that a body pillow might alleviate the pain somewhat, and the best item to serve as this body pillow was Rishi herself. Arnold peered at her, eyes still devoid of any emotion. His hand, however, stopped his gentle stroking of her cheek and instead roughly tousled her hair. The way he touched her now was less needy or soothing and more scolding. "I can't believe you." He finally released her, breathing a short breath. She apologizes. There was no way he'd be more comfortable with me in his arms. She thought, "I just wish there was some way I could help you get more restful sleep somehow. I feel like there's nothing more I can do for you." "I understand," he said after a lengthy pause. There was a shine to his blue eyes. This time he gently combed Rishi's hair back into place and said, "Let me borrow you then." The next moment he wrapped her up in a hug. Rishi squeaked as he pulled her waist to him with one arm and slung the other around her back. She buried her face in his chest, temporarily unable to breathe due to their closeness. She felt herself going red up to her ears. Her heart skipped beats as he rested some of his weight on her, practically clinging to her. With each beat of her heart, Rishi was reminded of her feelings for Arnold. Her chest tightened as she clung at his shirt. "I suppose I am being a bit needy with you," Arnold whispered, pressing a kiss to Rishi's forehead. "Really?" she asked. He didn't continue though, but Rishi sensed what he might be thinking. "He told me once that making me his wife, keeping me by his side, was just one aspect of his goal." She knew Arnold would never forgive himself. He despised the things he and his father did, and she had recognized that Arnold sees his marriage to her as a sacrifice on her part, given the sins he carries from his past. Rishi wrapped her arms around his back and held on to him as well. He seemed a bit surprised by the gesture, but he stroked her hair gently nonetheless. "May you have good dreams, Your Highness. May a day one day come when you are able to desire even such a small blessing for yourself," she said, listening to Arnold's heartbeat. Then she closed her eyes. She wanted to stay awake until he fell asleep himself, but she was already sinking into a warm sea of slumber. When she was asleep, he pulled back slightly from her, intertwining his fingers with hers once more. "I won't desire such a blessing," he said, though his word never reached her. He cast his gaze down, kissed Rishi's ring finger, and told her, "But I do hope you'll make my wish come true one day." For this last utterance, his voice was cold and foreboding. Now, I don't know why, but this novel has given me more questions than answers, so I'm not sure if Volume 7 will be the last one. But for now, let's talk about this last scene. A lot of people believe that the wish he wants from Rishi is for her to kill him after he has achieved his goal. I also believe in this theory because he doesn't seem to care much about himself. He isn't interested in power, and he isn't the type who'd want to rule the world either. So even though I'm not entirely sure what his goal could be, I think his wish for Rishi is to end his life, because the author literally wrote that he said this line in cold voice. So it's definitely not something romantic. Tell me your thoughts about this as well. And that's it for the video. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you for listening to me. Take care of yourself and goodbye. cry.
I don't really wanna hurt you, but I can't control the pain. If you're sticking by my side, maybe we could be okay. Okay, maybe you could be the change.